Well, welcome out there to my program once again. Always a pleasure to have you out there, and it's always a pleasure to be here putting on a show. This is the day after the election. This is November 7th, 2012, and we're going to find out from my guest what he thinks about what happened in regards to the election. Now we know it was a national election, and there was state offices that were contested, congressional seats, Senate, House of Representatives, and a few local things. So in general, we're going to talk about some of the local stuff, and maybe we'll reach the national agenda, the elections, what took place there. I'm sure you've had enough time to absorb what took place last night and today, of course. But some of the local things you may not be all that familiar with, and my guest is. He's loaded with statistics, and he's going to give us quite a rundown. So pay attention, and I mean that politely, because a lot of good information is coming out. So welcome, CJ, once again to the show.
Thank you, Richard. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Well, I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's been a while. I miss coming in every so often. You know, it's a lot of fun.
Well, it's always...
I think today's show is going to be very interesting. I think one of the things you missed, though, is that while it was a national election, what happened nationally happened locally. And I think it's changing the face of the electorate that we know today. And I think this was a good thing for the United States. I really do.
Okay, when you say changing the face, a good thing for the electorate, can you expand on that?
You know, the country has been divided for so many years now through the Obama administration. And what we saw yesterday in the election was a 48-48 split. 48% Democrat, 48 Republican. But the 4% in the middle, those independent voters, were the ones who made the change in the election. Because if you look at the outcome of all the elections, it's not major margins that candidates, including the president, won by. But the thing is that you have to look at the parties. The parties aren't the old parties that we know of, especially the Republican Party. The Republican Party has to wake up. So this is not the Republican Party of the 1950s. We have to be the Republican Party of 2012.
Where was the Tea Party? Was it
the Tea Party? Well, I don't even think was included in as a contest runner in this whole situation. And just for full disclosure, I'm no longer a Republican, so I want people to realize that.
Well, that's okay. You're still welcome to the program. Well, I mean, the Tea Party, it's not a real party anyway.
No,
they just call themselves Tea, and they use the word party, but it's not like the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or any other party. They usually support candidates or oppose candidates. That's basically their agenda?
Yes, basically they're looking for fiscal conservatives. They don't care if you're socially conservative. They want you to be fiscally conservative. They're looking for smaller government and smaller taxes. They want a financially responsible government. And they support candidates that are financially responsible.
And family values, is that the other side?
Family values comes into play with some Tea parties, but mostly with the Tea Party, what T stands for is taxed enough already. And that's what they're talking about. They're really onto fiscal conservatives. And I think that's where Scott Brown made the big mistake in this election, was that he didn't have that support of the Tea parties that he had in the past.
Now, the Tea Party had a few functions here in the city of Fall River. Is that kind of gone?
Yeah, the Spindle City Tea Parties, I believe what they were called, they kind of dissolved after that election process 2 years ago. And they came out and supported numerous candidates, of which I think only one of their candidates won, and that was Sheriff Hodgson. But they just seem to fizzle. And a lot of the Tea Party organizations do seem to be fizzling out. I know that the South Shore and Plymouth Tea Parties are still very active.
Now, do they have any affiliation with the group Occupy Wall Street?
No, they're separate organizations altogether, and they stand for different things.
Now, the Senate race here in the state of Massachusetts, any surprise there?
Highly contested race. It was so they really didn't know how to call it. And the money that was spent on that race.
Well, we're talking about Scott Brown.
Yes, Scott Brown and Elizabeth Warren. Scott Brown was the Republican, Elizabeth Warren the Democrat. And they were really making their journeys, just like the president and Governor Romney were doing, right up until the last minute. They were making it right to the last minute of polling.
But Scott Brown, in the end, it was
I believe it was $80 million was spent on that election by both candidates.
Historically, one of the most expensive?
It is the most expensive senatorial race for Massachusetts, and I believe for anywhere in the country. But the thing is that this is where the national change also happens here in Massachusetts. First and foremost, Massachusetts has always been a Democratic state. And that's why in presidential elections, you don't even see them waiting for the Massachusetts numbers to come in. They automatically give Massachusetts the Democratic candidates. That's kind of sad in a lot of ways because that means Massachusetts is not a player in any of the significant elections nationally. They're only for their state elected officers. But that 48-48 came into play again. And if you look at the numbers, I mean, just here in Fall River, it was a 66 to 33% split.
66.
Right. 66% went to Elizabeth Warren. You're looking at 15,727 votes for Elizabeth Warren, 7,781. But historically, that's the way Fall River has always voted.
It's a Democratic town.
It's a Democratic town. There's no ifs, ands, or buts
Republicans
about
don't
it.
win here.
Yeah.
Except the sheriff.
Except the sheriff.
He took Fall River against a Democrat.
Yes.
And he did very well.
And it's interesting because Fall River hasn't had an elected Republican official since Jack Medeiros, who was a city councilor, and Margaret Heckler.
Yeah.
Those were our last two mainline Republicans.
Well, Blute was a Republican.
But he wasn't elected out of Fall River. His numbers didn't come from Fall River, it came from the rest of the district.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Those numbers came right out of Fall River.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see that historically we just don't elect Republicans.
Why do you think that is? Because it's Fall River was basically a manufacturing town, a lot of workers versus the mill owners who tended to be more.
You know, it's very interesting because Fall River has always been a mill community, manufacturing town. Unions has always been big on unions. And the unions, while we don't have the manufacturing and the unions have shrunk in Fall River a great deal, the unions are still big players.
Still get that mentality.
We still have that mentality in Fall River.
If you're a Democrat and you
Right.
go into that polling booth and you want to vote for a Republican, you don't know. Maybe somebody's watching you. They got that. It's like going into a confessional.
Exactly.
I mean, you just got to do it the right way.
You
and
have
you
to
have to vote for a Democrat.
You know, and I've spoken to many people in Fall River over the years, and they all say the same thing. I only vote Democrat. But do you know anything about it? I don't have to know anything. He's a Democrat.
As long as he's a Democrat.
She's a Democrat. And that's really a sad way to elect your official just because they're a Democrat.
Well, you know what they say, and you've probably heard this a number of times, so a serious Republican doesn't bother with Fall River because he can't win, and a serious Democrat doesn't come into Fall River because the person knows it's already, yeah.
Exactly. And that's why Fall River...
And so what does Fall River get for that?
Nothing.
And why don't they understand that?
They just can't get, for some reason, it just can't get into the subconscious and the conscious mind that as long as they can depend on Fall River to do what they do all the time, it's never going to change for Fall River.
Do you think it translates eventually to what you might call puppet governments in the city?
For Fall River, it is a puppet government. It is controlled by the Democratic Party, both locally and statewide. Everything that the elected officials in Fall River do, they do for the party. I mean,
they have to get approval from the party first?
Exactly. You know, everything's got to run through the party. And we've seen this in previous elections. For instance, Kevin Aguirre and myself, when we were running against each other 2 years ago, Kevin's supporters that were out at the polls came from Brockton, Worcester, Springfield. They were supplied by the Massachusetts Democratic Committee. Well, they weren't his supporters. They were hired hands by the Massachusetts Democratic Committee.
Now, we had some local things. We had Dan Botello. He ran for the office, a congressional seat. didn't do all that well, but he mounted a pretty good campaign. He was
For somebody who's a first-time
and that's
out
a
of the
big
gate,
that's a big office. I mean, we're not
Right.
talking about
it's not like he was running for city councilor. First time out of the gate, he runs for Congress. And, you know, I helped Dan a lot along on his campaign route, and I told him when he approached me for some help, I said, Dan, you don't have a snowball's chance in hell. He says, I know, but I'm doing this because we need to get the message out. And I said, okay, fine. But, you know, coming out with 10% of the vote,
is not that bad.
not that bad, especially seeing that he came out ahead of the Republican. The Republican in the race did.
Well, how did he do in
came
Fall
last.
River? Dan Botello.
In Fall River, Dan Botello got 2,966 votes, which was actually 30% of the vote in Fall River.
And how about the others?
Christopher Sheldon got 1,463, which was 15% of the vote.
And Mr. Keating?
And William Keating got 5,231 votes, which was 54% of the vote.
Well,
So Dan got more than half of the vote that Keating got.
but, I mean, you might say a native son.
Yeah, Fall
So-
River boy.
He gets outdone by someone who lives out of Fall River.
You know, and the funny part about it is Keating's not
What?
even from this district.
Why,
He's from Quincy.
why do you think things like that happen? Why do you think people will not vote for someone who say, this guy is from Fall River? If by chance he becomes a congressperson, and he lives right down the street here from us in Fall River, we're going to have a good chance of getting something, hopefully substantial.
Exactly.
Yet they will vote for someone who lives out of Fall River. And he got almost double the vote.
Yeah,
Dan
and they vote, and you look at it, they voted solely because they got caught up in the national trend, which was the 48-48 and 4%. People voted Democrat across the line,
even in Fall River.
even in Fall River.
Not
And
voting
Fall River
for-
always votes Democrat.
but not voting for a...
And that's why Bill Keating did not worry about Fall River at all.
very, very rarely showed up after...
And as a matter of fact, to quote Bill Keating, he said that Fall River and New Bedford are not important to this race to him.
Oh, well, so that's how it goes, right?
And remember that statement in a couple of months or even a year when we need something, and he says, you're not important to me. I don't have to worry about you because you're always going to vote for me. You're always going to give me your vote.
So in other words, the city is delivered up on a silver platter?
Exactly, always is, and that's why Fall River gets the crap end of the stick.
Now, the other thing that is a surprise in a way is that Community Preservation Act.
Ooh, the CPA.
Let me ask you this, as a practical question. Why would a landlord or why would a homeowner vote themselves a tax?
They wouldn't. They would not. And as a matter of fact, but the interesting part of this race is this. Totally, there was 24,195 votes in this election. On question 4, totally, there was 707 votes.
That's quite a few votes.
Okay, 19,000 total. 11,350.
You know of the 24,000, do you know what the percentage of registered voters that
That's
is?
59% of Fall River's registered voters.
That's pretty high turnout.
They say it's 59, but we have 50,000 and change, and we had 24,000 people who showed up. I think it's about 50%, which is
Yeah.
a high turnout for Fall River. But on question 4, 11,352 voted for it, 8,345 voted against it. Now, that's a 57-42 split. And I'm sure that the landlords came out and said, you know, I'm going to vote against giving a tax hike to myself. I know I'm a property
and to the
owner.
renters, because they'll pass it on.
Right.
A landlord is in a very unique position in a
But the
sense.
problem was that the misinformation that came out by the pro-CPA organizations, that this is going to repair parks, this is going to give, preserve buildings, this is going to, that's not what this money's for. We cannot use this money for existing maintenance purposes. So if your park bleachers need to be repaired, this money cannot be used for that. And Al Lima and his crew of socialists turned around and said, oh no, we had to turn away matching money from the state because we couldn't come up with the money to replace the bleachers in North Park. Yes, that's true. We had to turn the money back because we were in a financial crisis and we didn't have the money to put up to replace the bleachers. But we can't use CPA funds to fix the bleachers. This is for preservation. And the one thing that the people did not even look at was the fact that a percentage of this money is guaranteed to be used for affordable housing.
A percent. Now, when you say a percentage is guaranteed, why do you say that? Is that
is in the
state law?
That is in the law.
So if they collected, just say the CPA tax collected $1 million.
Yes.
Is there a percentage that has to be allocated to?
The rumors are the CPA people did not present it, and they were saying 10%. I've been told it can be as high as 30%. So if you're looking at 10%, you're talking about $100,000. If it's 30%, you're talking $300,000 of this money can be used to build in your neighborhood a 12 apartment unit for Section 8, low-income housing, regulated rent, and you have no choice. So when this comes up before the CPA and somebody wants to put on Highland Avenue an affordable housing unit and they can't do anything about it, then they'll wonder why it happened. But the thing that's going to really happen is when our tenants, the people who rent in the city, realize the landlords aren't going to keep eating all of these tax increases. It goes somewhere, and these tax increases go to you, the person who rents.
Now, there was a race with, for the county commissioners, 2 out of 3. 2 county commissioners were up for, you might say, one for an actual election because he was appointed, and the other for re-election. Both were voted into office. What is county government? What does county government do?
County government no longer does anything. It really doesn't. It doesn't do anything. County government used to handle the budgets for the Bristol County House of Correction, used to handle the budgets for the buildings, and basically handle the budget for the people who worked for county government.
And it takes care of that Bristol Agricultural School.
And the Bristol County Registry of Deeds. Those are the things that Bristol County government covers.
Well, it gets most of its money from the Registry of Deeds.
Correct.
That's where the bulk of its money comes from, those
exactly.
fees.
And the thing is that the bulk of its money goes to Bristol County Agricultural High School, some of it, and then the rest goes to salaries and benefits for those elected officials and the support staff of Bristol County government. It's time that Massachusetts seriously look at county government and say, we no longer need it. It's time to do away with county government.
Now, people have said for a number of years, myself included, is that a function of county government would be better served if they were involved in the purchase of, we might say, textbooks for the schools within their county, so that every school, if it's going to be, every high school, if they're going to buy a history book, it's the same history book in every high school. And that would be the purview of county government versus the local school committees, or something that has to do with the school administration, where buying in bulk, not only textbooks, but paper and pencils and erasers, etc. Do you think that's a proper function for county government?
That would have been perfect. At least they were doing something to save the taxpayer money, save the cities and towns money. But the problem is this. Currently, the current way of setting up curriculums differs from district to district. If your children are in the Somerset school system and you have to move to Fall River for whatever reason, and your children come into Fall River and they start school in Fall River, they could be ahead of the Fall River learning curve.
Different textbook?
Different textbook, different learning, different subject matter, what's happening there. Then they move from Fall River to Somerset, and they're behind because Somerset's far ahead of them because they're on a different curriculum. Now, the federal government supposedly instituted education reform, which is supposed to unify curriculums across the board and across the country. But it still leaves the subject matter and the way it's done to the local school
District.
communities. So again, what good was it? We're just beating a dead horse. There's nowhere you can go, even within the Commonwealth, there's nowhere to go where you're going to get the same subject matter in school from one school district to the other.
Now let me, while we're on the school department, I know it's not has nothing to do with any election, but we're talking about county government, and we're talking about these people that just got elected. And what do you think of, let me put this out to you, of having, for the whole county, one superintendent of schools and maybe 3 assistant superintendents?
Well,
in other
then
words,
you'd be
take out this business of every school district having a superintendent, every school district having a school committee. It makes, in this modern age, very little sense. Maybe in the colonial days, where if you travel 20 miles, you were exhausted. You had to stay overnight. But people get in their cars, and 1 hour later, they're 20 miles away. Mm-hmm. So one superintendent for the whole county.
Well, we're going to be probably looking at that as we progress in our educational reform and what happens. More and more education, even at the elementary school level, is now being done over the internet. I mean, you are having one teacher teaching 17, 18, 19 classes all at the same time in different parts of the country. And that's how we're going to have to move eventually. We're going to have to move to a point where we don't have these individual school superintendents and school districts, because we're going to be unified. We're going to have unified school districts, and we're going to have them. Currently, you see that in regional school systems, where they have one superintendent for the region, one superintendent for that whole district. But currently, you try to wrestle out of the hands of an elected Fall River school committeeman the fact that they have to have a school committee for Fall River and unify it with something else, and it's never going to happen because I'll be out of a job.
Yeah, I guess
everyone's into self-preservation. That's just the nature of life.
I guess it would have to come from the state. It would have to be state law, state legislation.
Of course.
To start to solidify, combine these different districts, because they're really inefficient.
They are.
And they don't do any service to the students.
And
they're very
you see
expensive.
the waste. And you see the waste.
Huge amounts of money going to the school department. They never seem to get enough. And they're not turning out the product that the nation expects. So we had the local races, a few of the state races, and of course we had the national races. What do you think? What do you think the outcome is, CJ? We're going to be coming into the holidays, the turn of the year. All these people will be put into office. Is the country dead on center? Is it moving at all?
I think the electorate is moving, and I think that because the electorate is moving to a different foundation than our elected officials have seen before, where younger people are again starting to come out and vote, they're solidifying their causes, they're working towards an end goal to make it happen. In this election, they looked at both candidates, and this election was close. This
very
was
close.
Very close.
This is not a landslide.
This
by no
is
means.
not a landslide by
I mean,
any
nothing has really changed.
Right.
Bonner, Senator Bonner from
he
Ohio.
is still the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, he most likely he'll keep that job.
Right, and the only difference is that the Senate is now controlled totally by the Democrats. Well, I shouldn't say totally, but they lost 2 Republican seats, so there are now 2 Democrats there. I believe it was Iowa and Massachusetts. And the kicker was they got 1 independent out of Maine. They don't even have a Democrat or Republican out of Maine, and they're trying to figure out what side that independent.
Well, the Republicans still have the majority in the Senate.
But they don't have the supermajority they needed.
Okay.
They needed that supermajority, which they don't have.
Yeah. Well, the Senate, the House of Representatives, it's a peculiar branch of government in the sense that some people quit midterm. They get ill, they die. Races are almost always happening somewhere.
But I think the interesting thing is this. I think that the Republican House and the Senate both Democrat and Republican side, are seeing that the country's really fed up. And it's time for us to come together and work together for the country. Not to work together because I'm a Democrat and I want to give out more welfare, or I'm a Democrat and I want to give out more entitlements, or I'm a Republican and I want to give the millionaires, massive tax cuts. We have to come together and work together for the benefit of the country.
And how is that going to happen?
Well, I think that you
have a lot of that rhetoric. Politicians say, when I'm elected, I'm going to work with the other side. Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring the country together.
Well, you know, the president, on his first bid for office, made the promise that he was going to work together with both sides and make it happen. In his first 2 years in office, he did nothing. When he had a supermajority in the House and the Senate, and he could have gotten anything passed, he didn't do it. And everyone said, well, you know, he didn't. He inherited a mess. It was during that mess he could have done anything he wanted. Instead of giving away trillions and trillions of dollars, he could have fixed that. It wasn't until he got a Republican-controlled House that he started to strive to do things. And of course, the Republicans weren't going to work with him. They were going to go through this, it's us and them. I think now, if the president is true to his word, and he does what he says, where he's going to reach across the aisle, pull together both sides, and work together for the benefit of the country, and not for the benefit of the party, then I think we're going to see it happen. But if the Republicans are unwilling to move, it's going to happen again like we've had for the past 2 years. And the problem is that the Republicans need to learn that the Republican Party of 1950 is long gone. Now, the Republican Party of 2012 is here, and they're leading the pack.
Internationally, do we have the same standing that we used to have 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
No. President Obama has historically, so far in his first term, has gone out and constantly has been apologetic for what the United States has done, for what the United States is doing, and for how the United States has been. And that's wrong. We don't apologize for what we're doing. We take responsibility for what we've done, and if we've made a major, faux pas, we look at it, we say, we made a mistake, we'll take care of it, but you don't go out and make 20 trips around the world to apologize for the United States. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't.
So, CJ, we're getting down to the end of the program. I want to mention one thing, and that's coming up November 11th. We have the Veterans Day. There'll be a parade in the city of Fall River. It'd be nice to have people down along the parade route. The veterans always appreciate that. The crowds have been a little thin sometimes, but you get a nice day. It's going to be a Sunday. Bring the kids down there.
Beautiful sunny day, 60 degrees.
Well, hopefully it's going to be nice and sunny and 60 degrees. So there's no reason why people shouldn't go out for a little while. I mean, you don't have to stay and watch the whole parade, but the veterans are pretty much up in front, so give them a good round of applause, and then if you want to leave, I guess you could. So anyway, that's coming up. That's this Sunday. Is Monday a holiday?
Monday is the recognized holiday, yes.
So Monday will be a holiday.
Yep.
So be like a 3-day weekend.
Yes, it will.
Well, CJ, glad to have you on the program once again. We're going to see you again.
And thank you for having me, Richard.
And next time you come, don't be so mild and sugarcoat everything.
I never do. And I want to thank our veterans for their service, Richard. Thank you. Okay. And thank you, Richard, for your service to our country.
Thank you. Thank you out there for watching. And I think, and also some places for the veterans, some of the restaurants will be giving free meals. So you check into that. You can sit down and get yourself a free meal. If you're a veteran, bring your little veterans card, and you'll be all set for that day. So, thank you for watching, and see you next time.